Now, I want to introduce you to one of the first entrepreneurs I think I ever met. His name is Randy Powell. And at the time, he was going by the nickname of Price. So I used to have long dreads. And right after I cut them, I needed a barber. And this was my guy. So I remember going and sitting in the chair, and he used to always tell me stories about how he wanted to take over the world. Well, not quite, but he was always telling me these types of business adventures that he was going on. Now, he was probably one of the first real estate investors that I think I'd ever met, and he took everything from barbering and cutting hair to buying a laundromat and buying real estate. And I remember one time I actually helped him install like this laundry and dryer unit in one of his units. It was a really cool experience at the time, and honestly, it I think shifted my perspective for the rest of my life. So I want to introduce you to someone that changed my life, and ladies and gentlemen, Randy Powell.
Hey there, how's it going?
Good. What's going on?
Oh man, I'm living. Sun's shining. I'm living great right now. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm really grateful that you took some time to hang out with us, man. We appreciate it. Maybe you could introduce yourself.
No problem. What's going on, everybody? It's Randy Powell. I am a realtor and an investor living in Canada, Durham region. If you're aware of where that is.
Yeah, little Durham, right?
Yep.
All right, so question for you, Randy. Do you remember the first time you made 100 grand in a year?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so we gotta dive in, man. How did you do that?
Honestly, it was one in my second year of being a barber.
Okay, so you were a barber. You used to cut hair.
Yep, I used to cut hair.
Interesting. And you made your first 100 grand cutting hair.
That's right.
Okay, so what was that like? Like, where were you at the time? How old were you? What were some of the things that you were doing on a day to day?
I was 24 going on to 25. And it was my second year at this new barbershop. And you know what? I buckled down and I just cut from morning till evening, and $25 at a time, $20 at a time, and you realize that by the end of the year that you did your six figures, the infamous six figures.
That's crazy.
Hmm.
So, like, did you ever think that barbering was gonna do that for you, or what did you kind of get into it like thinking? Like, what was your
Honestly, no,
expectation?
no. I just wanted to make money. I just wanted to be able to pay my bills. Right? I had a skill that I didn't even think was going to take me anywhere because I was just kind of still fresh out of college. But I realized that with anything else, any business is almost the same, right? You put your time, you put the effort, and you'll reap the rewards of it, right? So,
Interesting. So, how did you get started in barbering? Like, how did you even learn that?
to be honest, when I was about 15, right, I couldn't really afford a haircut. Right at the time, I didn't have you're not working, and you don't have, and you get allowance like everybody else. Right, their parents pay for their haircut. You have to figure it out on your own. So I couldn't afford a haircut. So I decided to go buy a pair of clippers, $35 at a store. So I was gonna cut my own hair,
I could
and
cut your hair forever. That $135 haircut will last
exactly.
forever.
Unless you learn about investments, right, you can have something that will pay you indefinitely after that.
I hear that. Okay,
Hmm.
so now you end up making your first 100 grand in hair in barbering,
Yeah.
right? Do you remember what you spent it on?
Well, it was just living. I saved a lot of it, right? I saved a lot of it because at the time you realize how important it was to save money, right, and not to like just spend. So I didn't have $100 full out cash, right? But cumulatively over the year, I made about the 100 grand, and obviously some goes to paying your bills. You might treat yourself here and there, but for the most part, I didn't spend it on anything in specific.
Interesting. Okay,
Hmm.
so maybe you could tell us a little bit about the story after barbering. To my current understanding, I don't think you're still in that, are you?
No, no, no. I'm not cutting hair anymore. I haven't cut hair in over 7 or 8 years. So I got into real estate maybe about 10 years after starting that barber career, and now I'm still in real estate as like I said, as a realtor and as an investor.
Interesting. Okay, so let's dive into that time, as you were transitioning from one to the other.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn more about what some of those first moves were and kind of some of the things that you got into, like right after barbering.
Right. So as a person that was, used to making cash money as a barber, right, you didn't want to give that up. And I knew I got my license in real estate and I was going to stop cutting hair. So I didn't want to just go cold turkey into real estate. So before I, left the barbershop, I actually bought a laundromat.
A
right?
laundromat?
Yeah,
Of all things, a laundromat?
yes, of all things,
Okay.
because I didn't want it to. I didn't want anything to take up my time, and that was the reason why I was coming out of barbering, right? Because I knew that I was going to be trading time for money as a barber, right? So, what other businesses are out there that you can actually make passive income from, where you don't have to be there for every hour of the business day, right? And there's not many, right? I'm sure there's some. I'm sure there's a lot of people doing things on the internet now, right? But at the time, you weren't thinking, e-commerce and that kind of thing. So, laundromat is a tangible business. It's something that I didn't think was going to be too difficult to learn. Everyone knows how to operate a washing machine, I hope.
Do they?
I think so.
You're the
said,
laundromat.
I said I hope, right? You'd be surprised. But no, yeah, it was one of those businesses where I just knew it's cash, it's passive, and I can do it while being a realtor at the same time.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that how did you find this laundromat? Like, did you just go on the internet and type in laundromat for sale, or like what was that process like?
No, the Business Exchange magazine. I don't know if you know the Business Exchange, do you?
Well, maybe you could break it down for some of our guests.
Yeah, it's just a magazine. It's a local magazine that a lot of commercial deals, a lot of business for sale, a lot of franchise for sales. If you're gonna buy maybe like a Pita Pit or something like that, those are kind of the media outlets that were available at the time. Not everything was on the internet, right? So it's something that you can pick up at any local shop. It's for free. You you browse. You want to buy an apartment building. Those are the kind of things that are inside of the Business Exchange.
Interesting. Okay. Now, do you remember the first time that you made 100 grand in a month?
I'm trying to remember if I ever made 100 grand in a month. I don't think I did it like accumulatively in the business, right? But for example, you're buying a real estate deal, and a property's worth 500,000, and you get it for 4. You automatically know right there you just made 100 grand on the purchase. It's kind of unrealized gains, but in the sense where if you ever want to say I made 100 grand in a month, that would probably be the closest thing.
Interesting. So, do you own properties right now?
I do.
Maybe
yes.
you could tell us a little bit about how that works and like what that actually means for maybe a portfolio.
Okay.
We haven't really dove into too much about like how rentals actually work. We just know a bunch of people have them.
Yeah.
So like it'd be cool. Maybe you could break down a little bit about that and show people like how the mechanics of it actually work.
Yeah, no problem. So I mean, I own some real estate holdings that are rentals, right? My favorite things are duplexes and triplexes currently, and it's where you have a property where you can either rent side by side or up and down, different rental family upstairs, different rental family in the basement. You try to buy a single family home, you might get $2,000 a month, and you get a duplex where you're getting 15 upstairs and 15 downstairs. You get $3,000 a month, right? So it's these are the kind of rental properties that just maximize your income, and those are the holdings that I prefer to keep.
Interesting. Now, do you remember buying your first one?
I do.
Okay, dive into it, man. Tell us a story about it.
My first rental property that's outside from my principal residence is a bungalow, and just like I described, it's upstairs and downstairs. Different people renting upstairs and downstairs, and upstairs at the time was bringing in maybe 1,300. The basement was about 1,000, so it's $2,300, right? On a property is costing you $1,500 to run, right? So do the math, and that's your profit every month.
Interesting. So what would you say you're at now? Like if you were to describe, let's say you were to put like a book of your life,
right?
What would you title this chapter, and what would you like describe this chapter as?
It's an interesting question. You're talking about my holdings, or you're talking about where I am in my life?
Your choice.
Okay. Right now we're in a phase where your retirement is set, it's put away based on my holdings and the rental income. Because the thing about rental income, right? If you keep those properties, that rental income is going to come in, right? People really want to work 30 to 50 years for their retirement when you can already have it locked in, booked away, guaranteed, where you know that it's actually making, let's just say, for example, random number, let's say you're making $6,000 a month in net, not even net, in gross rentals, right? You're going to be getting $6,000 a month at the minimum in the 30 years when the properties are paid for, right? Just think about that, and from a standpoint of working and not working. Yeah.
Interesting. And so if you were to go back, right? Like let's say the Randy before that $35 Clipper, right? Like if you had an opportunity to talk to him and he asked you, hey, future Randy, how do I make my first 100 grand? What advice would you have for him?
Well, first thing you're gonna have to do is invest in knowledge. That's like gonna be step number one, right? If you have a business interest, deep dive into it, research, find players that are in the game, find people who have failed and have succeeded, right? And then I would say if you're not reading a bunch of books on the subject, find a mentor, right? You got to fast track your way into success, right? And the money is just going to be a byproduct of that work and that research, to be quite honest.
Interesting. And so, what types of things are you fast tracking for your success or your future success? Like, what types of things are you working on these days?
Learning a lot more about multifamily residential. So, we talked about duplex and triplexes, but we're talking about buildings that are at 12, 20, 100 doors, right? The type of things that is involved in running a property like that, management and, costs. Those are the things that I'm deep diving into right now, and maybe some development.
Interesting. So you were telling me like this little story right before we hit record on a tough choice that you had to make, between something on your wrist or something in your keychain or something in your brain, right? And I'd love for you to just dive in quick and share a little bit about like what that was and some of like the principles behind why.
Yeah. Back I would say 2020, right? This was just before the pandemic. We didn't know there was a pandemic. I was sitting on a little bit of a cash, right? And I I can't remember from how long I've always wanted to have a Rolex, right? And I was at a point where I can buy the Rolex. It was gonna be my treat to myself, and it was fine. But at the same time, I found out about masterminds and networking and being in amongst being in rooms with certain like-minded people. So it's either I was going to invest in my knowledge in myself and join a mastermind, or I was going to buy the watch that I always wanted, right? So I had to make a tough decision, and I'll tell you, I chose the mastermind, and I had to put my Rolex dreams on pause for a second. But one thing I can say though is that it was well worth it, and a year later, I own two of them, and I have a wealth of knowledge now instead of just like a material item, right? So.
Interesting. Well, Randy, thanks so much for sharing, man. And before we go, where do you think like people could find you if they want to learn more about what it is that you got going on, what it is that you got cooking up? Maybe you could share where we can find you online.
Yeah, no problem. I am on IG, Randy Powell, just as the way it sounds with the underscore at the end. I'm there. Hit me up, and yeah,
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, man. We
no
appreciate it.
problem. Thank you, man.
Now, barbering, real estate, and laundromats. Now, that's only Randy's story so far, and I have a feeling he's going to get into a lot more trouble going forward. So I was very excited to introduce you to him. And Randy, thanks so much for being on the show. To all of you guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, you're now watching 100 Ways to Make 100K. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the things. I'm Javon.ca, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.